Good afternoon, everybody. I thought it would be a good time for us just to get together and for me to give you some of the updates on DeKalb County's financial picture based upon what we know about where we are, as well as some additional information that we've been gathering over the last few days. First and foremost, I think most of you are aware that DeKalb County's been impacted by this recession, just like local, state governments as well as the federal governments have everywhere. The value of real estate is falling, and local governments like DeKalb County depend primarily on their revenue source, their major tax revenue source coming from property taxes. We've been especially impacted in DeKalb County because we have a high number of residences here. We're still largely a bedroom community. We have had a high number of foreclosures in our county. We've been impacted by the incorporation of a new city in a commercial base that was drawn into that city. So all those have caused us to be hit especially hard. We have a cash flow problem. Over the last few years, we have seen increasing cost. At the same time, we've seen declining revenues, and we're beginning to see the impacts of that cash flow problem. We've been downgraded by the bond rating agencies. Recently, we had our ratings withdrawn by Standard & Poor's. We have been in some recent conversations with Moody's as well. I wanted to give you, I mentioned some additional information that's come to our attention over the last few days, and then to talk about the steps that we're taking to address it. One, in those conversations we've had with the bond rating agencies, they have generally gone well. Moody's has asked us for some additional information about our statements and financial documentation, which we're providing. I've been involved in those conversations along with the chair of the Budget Committee of the Board of Commissioners. We do believe that they will take action to downgrade us again, but we think it's going to be a minor downgrade. We think it is consistent with the liquidity problems that we are addressing along with the Commission at this time. And we think at the end of the day, if we take appropriate and swift action, which I'll outline in a few minutes, both rating agencies will restore our ratings at that time. Second, we've gotten some information from our tax assessor, which indicates that our values have fallen greater than we anticipated. Looks like we'll get about a 10% drop in the assessed value of our properties, as opposed to about the 4% which was factored into the budget. What that's going to mean is about an additional approximately $25 million revenue reduction that we're going to have to address mid-year. And so the following actions we are taking. First and foremost, we have been in regular communications with the bond rating agencies. We are having a good, healthy communication with them. As I mentioned, they've asked for some additional financial documentation, which we've been working on over the last few days, and we have been providing them with. They've given us a sense of what they're going to need and what they're looking at. I think they've had some questions about our fund systems and how they're set up, restricted versus non-restricted, and we've assured them that the restricted funds are in good shape and are not being touched, and we're handling those appropriately in accordance with the law. And as I mentioned, Moody's has indicated to us that they will be reviewing our documentation, that it is likely that they will take what appears to be an appropriate action to downgrade us, but not a severe action, and they won't be at least at this time, they're not going to be taking any action to withdraw our ratings. Second, we're having regular communications with the Board of Commissioners. And the presiding officer and the budget chair, as well as other commissioners, and I have been talking on a regular basis about the budget situation. Commissioner May, who's chair of the Budget Committee, has joined us in conversations with Moody's. He has represented that the board by mid-year will be taking actions to adjust the budget raised the millage rate, and we've also been having conversations about actions that the administration will take to conduct audits and to look aggressively for opportunities of outsourcing services. And so we are coming very close to taking those actions and striking agreements about how we will all move forward. And then third and finally, once the board does take the appropriate actions to make the necessary mid-year budget adjustments, I've invited the presiding officer and the budget committee chair to join me and our CFO and other staff to a trip to New York to sit down and meet face-to-face with the bond rating agencies to talk about how we believe we've addressed our liquidity, the liquidity issues that they have raised, and to ask them at that time to restore our ratings. And so I wanted to provide you with that update and have this opportunity to have a conversation with you about it. I've got our CFO, Joel Gottlieb, here, and our COO, Richard Stockner. So if there's any questions that you asked that I may not be able to answer, I will certainly punt to them.
Mr. CEO, I have a question. Valerie Morgan, I'm News.
Hi, Valerie.
Hi. What are the specific financial questions that they are asking? What is it that they've been asking for that they need in order to restore the bond rating? Is it just a matter of the liquidity issue? Or?
Yeah, well, that's, and I'm going to let Joel and Richard also respond, but liquidity seems to be at the heart of their concerns. They obviously want to see our bank statements, and they've asked for bank statements for 2011 to date, as well as 2010. They've asked for information about, as I mentioned, our restricted accounts versus our unrestricted accounts, and wanted some clarity about, which accounts we may or may not have borrowed from in order to meet our month-to-month obligations. They've asked about actions that would likely be taken by the Board of Commissioners and what the timing for those actions are, and we've had to explain to them, first and foremost, Standard & Poor's, for example, it wasn't clear that we were on a calendar year budgeting basis, which is not unusual. But the other thing that we had to explain was how we adopt a budget at one point in the year, and then the action to set the millage doesn't come to mid-year, so that they could clearly understand that there was no dragging in the setting of the millage. One leads to the other. But we provided them with a timetable related to that. So I think they're happy thus far with the information we provided. Obviously, they can see, as anyone can see, as you track over the years, how our revenues have gone down and how our costs have increased, and how our costs are now a much larger percentage of our revenues than they were in 3 years ago, say. So there is that condition that they're concerned about, but hopefully as the millage gets adjusted along with some other budgetary adjustments and cuts that we'll make, we'll have a even better picture, and I think they'll be pleased.
Do you all want? Even after answering all of those questions, will the county be in a better position then to address those issues and restore the rating?
If we take the appropriate actions, if we continue to take the actions that we tell them that we're going to take, and some of that will obviously depend upon actions that are ultimately taken by the Board of Commissioners, which is why we've included them in the discussions, and then some of it will depend upon actions that are taken by my office, which we are committing to take, such as audits and outsourcing of services.
The basic long-term issues are to build up and maintain reserves at the appropriate levels, which in our case is 1 month of the equivalent of 1 month's expenditures.
Or about 45 million,
which is. So it's a matter of trying to build back those reserves over the short and intermediate terms.
Yeah, and let me be real clear about that. Thanks, Joel, for adding that. I mean, what we've essentially done is we've drawn down our reserve balance in order to continue to operate the county without any kind of a millage increase up to this point in time. Well, that is severely low at this point in time, and so...
What is it right now?
Is it at 9?
What we have as part of every year's budget
A line item.
put a line item in the budget as budgetary reserve. For 2011, that number is $12 million.
Okay.
But having said that, if the revenues and expenses are off by some level, then that tends to get depleted because you're basing it on a lot of assumptions of tax digest and various other factors. So we hope that we'll have the $12 million for this year plus additional funds. The way the fund balance is accumulated is that we have more revenue than what we anticipated and less expenses. And hopefully that 12 million will be there at the end of 2011.
Yeah, the trend that we've been dealing with in this recession is that our revenues are falling below, or they're falling, period. And departments, while they're reducing their expenses, are spending, as a result of that, a higher percentage of the budget that they receive.
Over the years, we've cut out a lot of the discretionary funds for departments, and so the level increases.
Yeah. We've reduced our spending prior to the added adjustments that were put in by the board, $113.9 million since I've been elected. We'll continue to operate with a reduced number of expenses. It's still going to continue to be well under $100 million. But at the same time, we're going to have to rebuild that reserve fund. There is a proposal put forth by Jeff Rader. I'm not sure that, if there'll be some form of that proposal or what the board will ultimately do. But the one good thing about Commissioner Rader's proposal is that it addresses the problem with the budgetary reserve. And that's one of the things that the bond rating agencies are very concerned about. And so what they've heard from the commissioners is that the commissioners plan to take action to make the budgetary adjustments, to begin to rebuild the reserve, to make appropriations in some of the critical criminal justice areas, and to adjust the millage rate. They've also heard from the board that they'll do that on a schedule, what the schedule will be, so we think they have a better understanding of that. They understand that we're working with the board to agree on some further series of cuts, and so I think as long as we move on that schedule, both branches of government, then they will be generally comfortable. At the same time, until we act, there may be another action taken by Moody's, which we anticipate.
Losing the bond rating, how much does that cost the county?
Did you want to add something?
Yeah,
Richard?
Yeah, I wanted to make a point about liquidity issues, and that is, we're dealing with
Can you be heard?
We're dealing with two issues here. One is the liquidity issue having to do with day-to-day operations. As you know, we anticipate, and we have had discussions with the board and have a paper before the board to issue tax anticipation notes. The annual liquidity issue comes from the fact is that we expend our money across the whole 12 months of the year, but the balance of our money comes in when we send the tax bills out in the latter part of the year. And so in the past, we've generated a surplus at the first part of the year to carry us, and we no longer do that, and so we have to issue tax anticipation notes. And one of the things the rating agencies is very interested in is the cash flow associated with that. How does that work out? So that's the liquidity issue having to do with day-to-day operations. The other issue having to do with liquidity, as the CEO has stated, has to do with the imbalance in terms of falling revenues in terms of our costs, and that is that how do you intend to address the imbalance between your revenue sources and your expenditures? And what they are looking for is, it's not a complicated formula. We either have to reduce our expenses or increase our revenues, and that is the long-term liquidity issue that they would like to see addressed. And so we're trying to address both of those issues in terms of doing that. In terms of the cost,